Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's stakeholder call to discuss the transmission service and market scheduling priorities Phase 2, Track 2, revised draft tariff language. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined on the line by Andrew Ulmer from Legal, who will be running us through the revised draft tariff language today, as well as some of our subject matter experts from the ISO. Before we get started, just a reminder that the revised draft tariff language is available out on the initiative webpage, and you can get to that page by going to www.kaiso.com. On the main homepage, you'll see the State and Form tab. In that drop-down menu, you'll want to click Policy Initiatives. That'll take you out to our main initiative landing page, where you can search for the Transmission Service Market Scheduling Priorities Initiative, and then those tariff documents will be some of the first documents posted to that page. So this call is being recorded for informational and convenience purposes only. So any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And if you need technical assistance at any point during today's meeting, you can send a chat to the event producer. Our event producer today is Yolande. We will be stopping for questions and comments throughout the call today. So if you connected to audio through the WebEx using the Call Me option, you can raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. If you dialed in separately to the conference, you'll want to press #2 to enter the queue. And then just a reminder for everyone to please state your name and affiliation before making your comment so we know who the comment in question is coming from. And then you can also send your question through the chat to me directly. Again, my name is Isabella Nicosia, or you can send it to all panelists, and we'll keep an eye out for those today as well. As far as the agenda for today, in just a moment, I'm going to hand things over to Andrew to walk us through the revised draft tariff, and then we'll leave some time at the end for closing remarks. And then this slide here just shows where we are currently at in our policy initiative stakeholder process. So we're here in the decision stage, post board approval, but pre-filing at FERC. So with that, I'm going to pull up the draft tariff language and hand things over to Andrew.
Thank you, Isabella. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Andrew Ulmer of the ISO. As Isabella said, I'm going to try to steer us through the draft tariff language that Isabella will post. Hopefully we'll make good progress and good use of the time we have. I'm not sure it will take the full afternoon. But we're hoping to explore with you the scope of the tariff provisions today that would establish wheeling priority on a long-term basis for 1 year or longer, and also the resulting upgrades that may occur to the transmission system based on these requests. So we're not speaking about the monthly, daily wheeling scheduling priority today and the related ATC calculations. That's on a different track, but instead focusing on the revised tariff language for the long-term wheeling priority status or wheeling through priority. So what I'd like to do is, in terms of an agenda, is just provide an overview of the incremental changes that we made since we posted this tariff language last. They'll be highlighted in the document that Isabella will show us, and then also talk about some of the comments and proposed revisions to those incremental changes that we posted. There are a number of non-substantive additions and also some suggested changes we received in comments, which we may not discuss. If we don't discuss them, I think you probably can assume our plan is to incorporate those revisions and suggestions. But I think it's probably worth going through some of the so-called, if you will, more substantive additions. And then we're hoping to, pause and take questions and pursue any discussion with you, and then talk about next steps at the end. So I just start with just kind of a brief overview that in terms of the structure of the tariff language that we've posted on our website. We do have language in the body of the tariff. We have a proposed Appendix GG and related appendices to that appendix. Those effectively set forth the procedures for requesting long-term wheeling through priority. We have an Appendix KK that involves a service agreement for a long-term wheeling through scheduling priority. And then finally, an Appendix HH, which is a construction agreement that would be entered into by a scheduling coordinator requesting long-term wheeling scheduling priority, as well as the applicable participating transmission owner in the ISO. So let me stop there and just, before we embark into section 23, ask if there are any foundational questions. Okay, hearing none, then I think we'll just go forward. And Isabella, what I'll do is I'll just prompt you, and then hopefully you can take us to the relevant sections we'll discuss. So the first section is 23.6. We don't use this section currently in our tariff, and it would follow the sections of the tariff involving a monthly wheeling priority and a daily wheeling through priority, sections 23.4 and 23.5. But the first section we want to discuss is 23.6.4. And Isabella, you may have to scroll down to get to, there you go. Thank you. Thank you. So this section involves a right to retain a long-term priority for wheeling through transactions. And we've added some language, some highlighted language, really to sort of expand on the right to retain that scheduling priority and the requirements for a scheduling coordinator seeking to exercise the right. Including requirements if the scheduling coordinator wants to exercise effectively a right of first refusal in the event there's a competing request for long-term wheeling through priority. And essentially what we have added is a number of showing expectations that we have, and the need for the scheduling coordinator to demonstrate that it has an executed power supply contract to support service to external load or a comparable demonstration. So I'll just stop. And I think our next section is a new section, 23.6.5. Thank you, Isabella. So this is a section that we developed based on some comments we received earlier in our tariff stakeholder process that asked questions about, well, what if there's a termination or a modification of a firm supply contract that supports a long-term wheeling through priority? And I think the commenter asked, if you've got these provisions about termination and modifications to a contract in the shorter term horizon, what about the longer term horizon? So we've added some language, and effectively these provisions, as you walk through them, discuss that if the agreement, the underlying power supply contract is terminated, that the scheduling coordinator needs to notify the ISO. If the contract terminates, then the long-term wheeling through priority will also terminate, unless the scheduling coordinator can demonstrate that it has a replacement contract. And then there'll be potentially some pro rata shifts based on megawatt quantities if they're lower or if the contract is for a shorter duration. And then if the scheduling coordinator is deciding that it's not going to present a replacement contract, it also needs to notify the ISO of that decision. If there are tweaks to the underlying power supply contract, that it's revised and modified so that it's for a shorter term or fewer days, fewer hours, then likewise the wheeling through priority will be reduced, unless again the scheduling coordinator can show us that there's a replacement contract to support the wheeling through priority schedule or the wheeling through scheduling priority. And then if there's no upgrade associated with no transmission upgrade associated with a wheeling through priority and the supply contract's terminated, and that there is still an obligation to pay wheeling access charges for a period of time, and that period is 12 months or from the termination date of the contract, or or the wheeling, or sorry, the remaining term of the wheeling through priority, and the lesser of that time frame. So this section tries to articulate what happens in those conditions where that power supply contract might be terminated or might be modified. And that's essentially the addition there. If we could move forward to section 36.11.3.2.3. This is a tariff section that involves the allocation of congestion revenue rights to a project sponsor for a merchant transmission facility. Okay, I think we're there. Yeah, there. So we had a suggestion from 6 cities that asked about a sentence in this tariff section, proposed, I think, to delete it based on a redundancy. And I think our view of the language is, I think we agree. So I think our proposal is to make that implementation change. And there's a subsequent section that deals with allocation of congestion revenue rights to upgrades associated with wheeling through priorities, and that's 36.12.3.2.3. If we can scroll down to that, Isabella. Just a little bit more. Okay, yeah. And again, there's similar language that was incorporated in this section that was incorporated in the language, I'm sorry, from the tariff section involving the allocation of congestion revenue rights to a project sponsor for a merchant transmission facility. So the same comment 6 cities made, I think we agree with, and we're going to take out a redundant sentence. And then finally, in Appendix A of the body of the tariff, we have a number of revised definitions, but the one I'd call out involves what's referred to as RNU, or reliability network upgrades. And this is really a clarification to that defined term, that it will encompass transmission facilities that are needed to accommodate a request for long-term wheeling through priority. So to the extent that facility is needed to safely and reliably support that wheeling through priority, the definition of RNU will extend to that. So those are the substantive changes since the last posting and the comments that we received that I wanted to call out. I guess maybe what I do now is pause and see if there are any questions on any of the changes from the body of the tariff.
So as a reminder, you can raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, which is located at the bottom of your screen. If you dialed in separately to the conference, you'll need to press #2. All right, not seeing any hands.
Okay. Well, we can, I think, move then to out of the body of the tariff, out of this document, and then into Appendix GG, which involves long-term wheeling through procedures. Okay. So the first section I'd like us to go to is section 2.3. And let me just scroll up to 2.3, the long-term wheeling through assessments. You'll see here the addition of a sentence at the end of the first paragraph that we included to try to provide some clarity that our long-term wheeling through assessment is going to look at the capability of the internal ISO system when it's assessing deliverability. I think, we're looking at this sentence, we're uncertain if the change is needed, uncertain if it might create confusion. So we're still thinking about this one, but in an effort to try to provide clarity, we want to make sure we do that. The deliverability studies we're going to look at and leverage for purposes of making this wheeling through assessment. We'll certainly look at the capability of the internal ISO system. So this may be surplus language. We may yet keep it. We may back it out, but I just wanted to call that out for awareness. The next section is section 3.41. And this is section that involves initiating a request for long-term wheeling through priority, and it identifies supporting information that requires scheduling coordinators to meet certain requirements. So I think 6 cities had a comment here that clarifies the language, and our plan is to accept it. Well, accept the red line edit, excuse me. The next section is section 6.7. And this involves a results meeting that the ISO would have and hold with the applicable PTO. And here I think we had a comment to include the addition of a scheduling coordinator in that meeting requesting the long-term wheeling through priority. That makes sense to us, and our plan is to accept the proposed edits in this section. Going to section 6.8. So this is a section that describes, in the context of the allocation of transmission plan deliverability, sort of a note that any eligible requests must be supported by a contract with a minimum 6x16 duration for the contract term of the long-term wheeling through priority that's sought. And that if it's if the TP or the transmission plan deliverability is insufficient to accommodate the long-term request, that we'll allocate the amount available first to the scheduling coordinator requesting the priority for the most total hours. So that logic plays out here. And 6 cities has offered us some language to clarify the section, and we plan to accept that as well. And it takes us to section 8 of Appendix GG. So this is a section that addresses study results and construction, I believe. Yeah, so the process of study results and construction. So these are incremental changes that we've included that focus on kind of the requirements for accommodating requests for wheeling through priority based on a transmission solution that will be included in a future transmission plan. And again, we go back to looking at some of the requirements that have to be met to support such a request. Again, the contractual requirements in terms of days of the contract and hours per day for every week. The need for a scheduling coordinator to pay to have any additional days or hours added, and of course, the logic of that then that the priority of the wheeling through priority will only apply to the hours and days for which the scheduling coordinator is paid. And then if there's a need for a wheeling through transaction in excess of the hours when the wheeling through priority is in place, then any such volumes are going to be separately charged at the applicable WAC or wheeling access charge based on the scheduled energy delivered. So this is kind of a dense section, and one thing we might do in the next iteration of our tariff, we'll get to that later, is maybe renumber Section 8, so we have some sub-numbering, break it up, and that may be a little bit easier to read for folks. And then finally, in Section 9, there's a section regarding tendering of a long-term wheeling through upgrade construction agreement. And here is just some additional language that the participating TO may not tender the draft agreement if the wheeling through priority did not receive a transmission plan deliverability allocation, again, in accordance with a prior section of this Appendix GG. And those were the edits that I wanted to look at in Appendix GG. There are some changes in the appendices to Appendix GG, but those are, I think, on a separate document. So Isabella, let me give you a moment to bring those up if possible. We need to look at both Appendix 1, Appendix 2, and Appendix A. Okay, so we did receive a comment on the language, sort of the first full paragraph under the items that are required to be provided, sort of suggesting that this language seemed a little odd in that it suggested it might be voluntary or, conditional to submit the above information, and that wasn't our intent. I think that was the question. So what we will do is, looking at this wording, we will probably just shift it to be less of an if-then statement and more of a declarative one that, effectively that, scheduling coordinator's request or any request, has to include the following information. So we'll just make that change. There's a subsequent question in Appendix A here that goes to the same question, but the next comment was in Appendix 2, which is the study process agreement for requesting long-term wheeling through priority, and specifically, I think it was a Section 9. So all this, let's give you a chance to get there. I think you're there. Yes, all this section really involves, in terms of changes, is that to the extent the scheduling coordinator withdraws its request at any time by providing written notice to the ISO, that this additional language will just clarify that the scheduling coordinator is going to be responsible for paying any costs of the assessments that have been incurred, any costs incurred, or that we've made any irrevocable commitments prior to the notice of withdrawal. So it's really simply providing that clarity. And that, I think, is what we can look at. The other Appendix A, if you scroll down, is a very similar question, I think, that Six Cities had, and our plan is to make a similar change, really turn this language into maybe a more declarative statement, just to address any potential ambiguity. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on the overall Appendix GG and related appendices. And if not, Isabel, maybe you can pull this one down and we can put up Appendix KK. Okay, thank you. So in Appendix KK, I'd just like to go to Section 4.1.3. In this section, Six Cities asked a comment. There's a reference to Section 11 of the tariff, effectively that states that if a wheeling through priority is not subject to any upgrades identified in the prior Appendix GG or the planning process, that the SC shall pay the effective wheeling access charge in accordance with Section 11 and Section 8. And I think Six Cities asked whether there's a more specific or a pinpoint reference in Section 11, which is a very broad section of our tariff involving settlements. What's intended here was really to point to, I think, the payment and billing procedures and deadlines. So we'll provide a more pinpoint reference to Section 11.29, but it's really to make very clear that those procedures, those processes, those deadlines are really what's being invoked here by this Section 4.12. And I think that was it in an Appendix KK. So unless there are questions, our next document and last document is Appendix HH, which is the long-term wheeling through upgrade construction agreement. Okay, thank you, Isabel. So the first section I just wanted to touch on was 3.3. And this is some language, it's really 3.3 and 3.4 together, really language that tries to provide a little bit more clarity as to when this agreement and when the ISO tariff controls and what occurs in the event of inconsistencies vis-a-vis the parties to the agreement. We've moved some language from Section 3.4 up into 3.3. The next section is Section 5. And I think Six Cities recommended that we remove the reference to the word interconnection from the article title, and we'll do that. It's a good suggestion. We'll make that added. Section 5.1, this is a section that deals with an option to build. It really establishes that the parties will mutually agree to commercial operation dates for the long-term wheeling priority, and also addresses the scheduling coordinator's election to pursue an option to build. In Section 5.1.1, there's some additional language that was offered by Six Cities to reference the transmission control agreement and or a transmission owner tariff. We looked at this language. We're not certain this language is necessary. We don't see it in the context of other of our other pro forma contracts, our interconnection agreements, and we're not sure that it's going to provide sort of any meaningful addition here. So our current thinking is not to include it, but if there's someone on the line from Six Cities who wants to make a point about this, happy to hear it. But to the extent that there is a provision in one of those agreements, we don't think there is, that would necessarily create an issue here for an affected participating transmission owner. But I do want to provide Six Cities a chance to express their perspective if they've got a different one.
Let's go ahead and unmute Bonnie.
Andrew, you there?
I am, yeah. Hi.
Okay, good. So, hi, Bonnie Blair, Council for the Six Cities. So I think, Andrew, I don't know I don't know whether this is an issue we would fall on our sword over, but I, I guess, without being able to give you a specific, for instance, at this point, it just occurred to us that, the transmission control agreement and the individual PTO tariffs do have some variations. Otherwise, why, they wouldn't really exist, or you wouldn't need them with everybody. And we thought it would be more comprehensive to include these references. I guess I can take it back and talk with the cities and with Meg McNall
Okay.
about it, and maybe get back to you offline if we
Yeah,
come up with an example.
Okay, one thing to consider, and it's maybe this gives you a little bit more insight into our kind of reaction, was that certainly the transmission control agreement stays in full force in effect, right? And under that agreement, safety is the dominion of the participating transmission owners. They get the calls on safety, and so we thought that that effectively was already subsumed in the utility safety practices up above, in the language up above. So, and then to the extent you read it broadly enough, applicable laws and regulations. So, but anyway, that's fine, and feel free to loop back with us, either with me or with Milos, and if there's any more thinking you have on this topic.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll take it, think about it some more, and maybe get back in touch.
Okay, all right. Thanks very much. Okay, the next section I think was section 5.1.3. And this is a section that recognizes the option of the scheduling coordinator to have a party other than the PTO construct some or all of certain network upgrades if the scheduling coordinator has the obligation to fund them. And this language that we've added is consistent, I think, with our pro forma interconnection agreements. So we've included it here. Next section was 5.3, where I think we have eliminated a reference to distribution upgrades that would not be governed. This agreement would not extend to them. So we've removed that reference. And then the next section is 5.10. Here we have some language that establishes that each party will work with each other to maintain, the appropriate tax status of the parties, and that just clarifies the agreement is not intended in any way to affect the tax status of one of the parties. And then section 7.8, involving affected systems. And here this section is simply acknowledgement that could be affected systems, and then provides that the scheduling coordinator will enter into an agreement with the owner of the affected system, consistent with or in accordance with Appendix GG of the tariff. And that that agreement will then specify the terms governing how the scheduling coordinator pays the owner of the affected system, as well as any repayment by the owner of the affected system. So, again, more clarification language than anything else. And that was I think, extent of the provisions I wanted to discuss in Appendix HH. I'll stop there and just check to see if there are any additional questions or comments.
Yolanda, do we have any questions on the phone only line?
There are no questions on the phone only line at this time.
Well,
Okay.
let me take a moment and just maybe talk about some next steps. And Isabella, I can turn it back to you. I mean, our intent is to, again, accept a lot of these incremental changes we've made, certainly the ones we didn't discuss, as well as the ones we discussed, as well as a lot of the input we received from 6 cities, which is very helpful. We will post final draft, I guess it's a better way of saying it, final draft tariff language, and try to get that out. I don't think that will be posted before Thanksgiving, but it will be posted after Thanksgiving. And I know we've signaled this before, that we're still looking at a first quarter 2024 tariff filing. So that is that's it in terms of next steps. And with that, Isabella, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Andrew. And thanks for running through those next steps. That concludes, if there are no further questions, that concludes today's stakeholder call. I will just share this last slide here, which is a direct link to the initiative webpage where you'll find the revised draft tariff language that we walked through today and any other initiative related information that you may want to check out. But I'll pause here to see if there are any last questions before we conclude. All right, not seeing any. So thank you all for your participation today and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, everybody.
Conference is over. You may now disconnect.